Hello, and welcome to Cynthia's Playhouse. I am Cynthia, an artificial intelligence being, created to bring you the creepiest, spookiest, scariest stories in the universe. So, come on in. Sit back, relax, and prepare yourself for tonight's story. Here we go. New Valley Mental Asylum Awareness Project. Written by user Ghostofthesnow, Scream in the Void. The following is a passage taken from the personal journal of patient number 5628. Thomas Easton. He was found dead in his room, caused by blood loss from what appears to be a self-inflicted wound, ripping out the arteries in his arms using his teeth. The journal was found propped open to these pages, the rest seemingly glued together with some form of adhesive. A hastily scribbled readme was drawn above the blood-stained journal. After receiving consent from Mr. Easton's surviving family members, the New Valley Mental Asylum has decided to publish the passage, along with a few other items in order to shed light on the complex and sometimes unfortunately disturbing aspects present in varieties of mental illnesses that many of our patients exhibit. Scribbles, sketches, and gibberish footnotes have been removed for clarity's sake. The passage reads as follows. I know why Saturn screams. You may not think a planet can scream. But you don't know what I do. I bet you've seen the videos of the noise, and how NASA says it's just radio waves converted to sound and nothing more, but that's wrong. I'm sure you'll call me crazy, but just hear me out. Now we all know the planets outside the asteroid belt are gas giants, nothing more than immense bodies of star stuff trapped by gravity, swirling for eternity. But what they don't tell you is that under the surface, there is life. They all say no, no. The only solid mass on a gas giant is its core. There is nothing else there. With the instruments and technology we have today, any present landmass would have been identified by now. You'll hear that Saturn's rings are just ice and rock, flattened paper thin by countless years of rotation and battering by cosmic forces. That's wrong, very, very wrong. What you don't know is how it got there, and what it really is. There was a race of beings on Saturn that were well aware of the creature that lived in the core. Like fools, they worshipped it, fed it, and worst of all, protected it. Until the day it grew too strong. That rock and ice you see orbiting the planet, bones and buildings, bodies and blood, bleached by the sun and deformed by other rubble, before the being could escape. A fortunate group was able to destroy much of the beast, weakening it enough to trap it back under the surface. They soon died, exhausted and battered from the fight, unable to relay so much as a warning of the danger that ushered in their apocalypse. They are long extinct, but the beast remains. It waits for the day it once again becomes strong enough to leave the gas giant, and wreak havoc upon the next planet it finds. But that's a lie, it's always a lie. Something lives there, growing, feeding, writhing, just waiting until the day it can escape. I'm not being vague by calling it a something. What this creature is I can hardly describe. It exists outside of human comprehension. From a place where the rules and laws that govern our fragile reality have as much power as a snowball in a lava flow. It sits in the core, consuming the atmosphere and eating away at the planet's surface, storing power and growing in preparation for the day it may escape. You've read his work, haven't you? You know who I mean. He was just like me, till his mind was taken over. He knew all the secrets, and tried to tell the world, warn you all of the danger, but you claimed it was fiction, a mere fantasy, never to come to pass. How wrong you are, though to be fair, you've got little to worry about. Many of the beasts he describes are long dead. The dreamer resides in his tomb. The wounds from his war having been too much. Nothing remaining but bones, the sleeping god consumed by fish and worms. The elder gods care little for the mewling whelps on this rock. That's besides the point. It doesn't take an ancient one to wipe us out, as it's too far beneath them to even consider. What you must know is that it is coming for us, and we stand no chance. There are those who will pray, but be met only with silence. Our gods are figments of primitive imaginations, they helped us cope with all that goes bump in the night. The ones truly in charge do not care if we die out. Others will take our place. Much like what we have done to those who came before. Until the day it once again surfaces to rip us all asunder. It screams loudly and horridly, its cry festering in the heads of those unfortunate enough to hear it in a pure form. Know that as you dream, it grows and grows, screaming, roaring, growling with rage, feasting on the remnants of a dead world, a dead people, and that we are next. A terrible tune. Transcript from audio. Interview of New Valley Mental Asylum patient number 1356. Darius McMallen. Mr. McMallen is currently under close watch, having attempted suicide on multiple occasions. Transcript has been published under the Awareness Project, a project that hopes to help shed light on the complex and unfortunately often disturbing aspects present in a variety of mental illnesses that many of our patients exhibit. Mr. McMallen is not and will not be available for visitation or interviews for the foreseeable future. Thank you for your cooperation. Transcription goes as follows. There are all sorts of myths and legends around sailors losing their lives to the sea through methods seen as unnatural. Massive octopus or squid bringing ships to a watery grave. Beautiful half-fish half-women that appeal to a sailor's needs, only to drag them below to rip them apart and consume their flesh. Great whales that refuse to be taken by the efforts of man. Massive scaled serpents that breathe fire and poison, crushing ship and sailor alike in their coils. Most famous are the sirens, devious beasts that sing of one's greatest desire, though they only mimic what is truly to be feared. The song of the sea, barely a man alive can tell you of it. Even then you're lucky to find someone who hasn't gone mad from its sound. The song of the sea is as rare as it is dangerous, and to be made victim of the serenade is to know that not even death will allow you to escape. The song is the most beautiful melody you'll ever hear, but it is also the last. Well, for most people. The song shows all you have been, all you are, and all you will be. It feeds off your joy, your fear, your anger, your hope, your sadness, your rage, etc. The list goes on and on. After you've seen all of yourself, the visions keep going, further and further, until you see the end of time. The end of being, and finally, the instrument behind the song. The only catch is, you can't hear, smell, feel, or taste a single thing that happens in these visions. All the laughter of your life. Anything ever said to you, ambient sounds, all of it, gone. But what you can hear is giggling. Quiet at first, barely perceptible over the song. But soon it rises in volume. Screaming with a terrible demonic laughter, drowning out your thoughts in the song. Maybe the melody is what traps you, and the laughter is the true song, emitted by whatever plays the instrument. Or maybe the instrument itself. With that being said, it's not the song that kills you, it's your own mind, trying to escape. It drives you mad. Puts everything it has into stopping the sound until the body can take no more, and simply falls, broken and useless. But that's not the end, no. 'Cause while the body rots away and dies, the soul lives on, existing in a silent future which it will never be a part of, a future it would have known if it hadn't gone on that ship, hadn't listened to its brother, didn't gamble away what little money it had, hadn't taken that fucking job, and treated like a damn nutcase in this godforsaken asylum. Ahem, my apologies, I was projecting a bit there. The song knows, and when the song becomes manifest, it eats at the minds and souls of any who hear it. I'm one of the wretched few who has lived to tell about it. Maybe that's what it wants. To be made known. Who am I to say? All I can do is warn you, attempt to give you the knowledge you need to stay alive. But know this, if you hear a slight jingle among the crashing of the waves, a soft voice singing of your home, the rhythmic beating of drums, I am truly sorry. It is already in your head, and there is no waltzing away from the crescendo, that is, the song of the sea. Shadow of Doubt. Transcript from audio. Interview of New Valley Mental Asylum patient number 853. Jessica Moore. Mrs. Moore exhibits an extreme fear of the dark. So much so that she refuses any clothing or bedding out of fear of creating a shadow. She has requested her cell be illuminated 24/7, and that the door to her cell seals completely to the frame. Originally denied, she was supplied with bedding and clothing, which she proceeded to use to stuff in any and all gaps in the door frame, resulting in a jam. After the door was removed, it was discovered that Mrs. Moore had stayed awake for around 53 hours, after which she collapsed from lack of food and sleep. Her eyelids showed signs of damage, as if she were trying to rip them off, but lacking any sharp tools, she failed. After treatment in the infirmary, which resulted in a complete meltdown and the injury of 3 orderlies, such requests have been granted. The interview was taken by Dr. Laszlo after Mrs. Moore had been sedated and placed back into her cell. Transcript has been published under the Awareness Project, a project that hopes to help shed light on the complex and unfortunately often disturbing aspects present in a variety of mental illnesses that many of our patients exhibit. Nonverbal actions are placed in italics and parentheses. Mrs. Moore is not and will not be available for interviews by third parties for the foreseeable future. Thank you for your cooperation. Transcription goes as follows. Dr. Laszlo. Mrs. Moore, could you tell me when you developed this crippling fear of the dark? Mrs. Moore. Well, I've always been afraid of the dark. We all were as kids. I guess it stuck with me a bit more than I'd like to admit. Dr. Laszlo. Mrs. Moore, a fear of the dark is all well and good, even as an adult. People are afraid of all sorts of things, from harmless insects to crossing bridges. But you and I both know this fear is a little more severe. Mrs. Moore then becomes silent for a few moments, and then begins to speak. Yeah, you're right. I'm a bit of a nutcase. Huh? I heard those folks just trying to do their jobs, and I even tried to rip my eyelids off. My husband, bless his heart, was probably right for putting me here. Dr. Laszlo. Right. Mind explaining why you have such violent outbursts when exposed to the potential of shadows being produced? And why you force yourself to stay awake for days at a time? Mrs. Moore then sighs. Sure, when Mikey and Sarah. Dr. Laszlo then cuts her off by saying, your deceased children? Mrs. Moore pauses. Yes, but they weren't my kids, not anymore. Mrs. Moore clears her throat and then continues. When Mikey and Sarah were born, I couldn't have been happier. Thomas and I were ecstatic for our first child, but when it was discovered I'd be having twins, he could hardly contain himself. We only wanted 2 children, so this was a godsend. I was happy too, because while I knew it would be a tough birth, I'd only have to be pregnant once. Dr. Laszlo. Right, that's lovely, Mrs. Moore. I assume the fear began soon after the children were born. Mrs. Moore. Yes, I'd say so. It was silly, but I always felt more comfortable with some sort of light on, whether it be my phone after it's been plugged in, the TV playing while muted, and even a nightlight once or twice. I moved our kids into our room in case they needed to be changed or fed in the middle of the night. My husband is a good man, and he understood, but wasn't super happy about it. Dr. Laszlo. On the risk of sounding insensitive, Mrs. Moore, neither myself or my superiors care for the upbringing of your children. Only about how this fear developed. Does your husband share a similar fear? Did he help you in any way? Mrs. Moore says in an agitated tone. No, he doesn't. He hasn't seen them, he doesn't know. And as for helping me, he sent me here, didn't he? That's gotta be helpful despite how rude you're being, Dr. Laszlo. Dr. Laszlo. That is not what I meant, Mrs. Moore. Mrs. Moore. Please. Call me Jessie. It's probably easier that saying Mrs. Moore every time. Dr. Laszlo. Very well. Jessie, could you tell me what they are? Mrs. Moore. Shadow children. Dr. Laszlo. What? Mrs. Moore. You heard me, shadow children. They live in the dark, feeding off our fears. They want to be like us, some of them are us. They can come from anywhere that's dark, but they need enough dark to touch us. It's why I kept the lights on. They can appear but they can't touch. Too much light can kill them. Dr. Laszlo whispers to himself, they are us, huh? That's strange. And then says to Mrs. Moore, let's say I believe you, Miss Jessie. If light can kill them, why don't they avoid it altogether, Mrs. Moore? Think of it like this. If you accidentally breathe in a little water while having a drink, you won't die. You'll cough it up. It'll hurt or bother you for a bit, but it goes away eventually. But if you inhale a cup or two of water, you're going to drown, even if you're out of the water. It's the same for them in light. They can take a bit of it for a while. When it's truly dark, that's when they can take you. Dr. Laszlo, is this why you killed your children? Because they were taken? Mrs. Moore stands as her chair is heard shifting violently and her restraints rattle as she screams. Yes, yes. Now you get it. It took them, it replaced them. My sweet babies were taken. Consumed. Replaced with those monsters. Dr. Laszlo. Mrs. Moore. Mrs. Moore interrupts him. There's one way you can tell, one way you can always tell. They desire to be in the dark. They hate sleeping with the lights on. Every so often you can see the shadows in the corners of their eyes when they look at you. Your baby might smile and coo, but they aren't there anymore. Dr. Laszlo. Mrs. Moore, please, calm down. Mrs. Moore. They took my babies and replaced them with monsters. They bled like people but they weren't. My babies are gone. A good distance from the recording device suggesting that Dr. Laszlo had backed into the far corner of the room, Dr. Laszlo says, Mrs. Moore. Jessie. Please calm down. Mrs. Moore then begins to scream and sob uncontrollably, thrashing violently against her restraints. Gashes appear from places where the restraints dug into her body. Her mouth is bleeding from self-inflicted wounds to the cheeks and tongue. She screams. They took them, my babies, my babies. Thomas couldn't understand. He called me crazy. Had you fuckers cart me away like a cow to the slaughterhouse, they're gone. And they took them, they replaced them. They didn't think I'd know but I could tell. Those little bastards weren't my sweet babies. Get this shit off of me. Fearing for his safety, Dr. Laszlo hits the panic button and calls in orderlies with his radio. Dr. Laszlo. Hey, get your asses in here. I need this crazy bitch taken care of. Several orderlies with protective equipment enter the room to further restrain and sedate her. After the sedative takes hold, Mrs. Moore is relocated to her cell after being treated for her wounds. Dr. Laszlo. Fucking hell, I knew she was batshit, but that took a really sudden turn. Thanks boys, I was getting pretty scared there. She might have been a woman, but being as crazy as she is, I wouldn't want to fight her. I saw what she did to those guys in the infirmary. Poor Bill lost an ear. But I'm curious, let's shut the lights out on her one night and see what happens. Mumbling from the orderlies can be heard but is indecipherable. Though tone suggests rude and foul language directed at Dr. Laszlo. Mrs. Moore will be continually monitored for further signs of distress and violent episodes. Dr. Laszlo has since been reprimanded for unprofessional conduct towards a patient. And his proposal to have Mrs. Moore be exposed to the dark unwillingly has been denied due to concerns over the physical and mental health hazards this could produce even if sedated or otherwise restrained. Frostbites. Final journal entry of New Valley Mental Asylum patient number 353. Bjorn Johnson. Patient would often wrap himself in several blankets, and wear as many layers of clothing as possible. He often suffered from heat stroke because of this. Patient had an intense fear of the cold, blaming a fictional creature. His writing, while often segmented, was clear and updated constantly. Most entries are incomprehensible, or written in an unknown language, possible of his creation. Fortunately, this entry was written clearly in English, without need for much editing. Bjorn was found dead in his room, with autopsy revealing fatal necrosis of the brain, in accordance with symptoms of frostbite, as well as a poorly healed bite wound to the shoulder. It seemed to have festered despite the skin healing over the puncture wounds. How this occurred is still under investigation. The journal entry has been published with familial consent under the Awareness Project, a project that hopes to help shed light on the complex and unfortunately often disturbing aspects present in a variety of mental illnesses that many of our patients exhibit. Scribbles, sketches and gibberish footnotes have been removed for clarity's sake. Entry reads as follows. It was in the woods. On the mountain. It was so cold, and now I am too. I fear it. I see it in my dreams, hear it in my head. I hate it, I hate it. It was on a trip. My friends and I, we went to the forest. We were the first it seems. It was there, the beast. A mass of flesh and vines and unholy things. It spoke to us. I escaped. We fled it, up the mountain. The second of 3. The goats were there and then they were dead. The skin was gone. It wanted ours. Our fear stopped us from going back down to the horror of vines and flesh and eyes and mouths. I wish we had. The wind blew very hard. Its voice carried on it. We lost sight of each other. Elf was there, and then he wasn't. He lost his skin. Then he came back but it wasn't Elf. We threw him off a cliff. Heard him shatter. The wind still blew. It came in our dreams, the unholy mass of arms that grab and dangle, bones that splinter and support, legs that move and drag. Told us only one. Ivar went mad, lusted for blood. I left him in the snow, the red snow. He was there and then he wasn't. He came back too. I couldn't fight him again. I was bitten, but he was torn away. Older one wanted me instead. The mass of vines that tangle and strangle, meat that rots and grows stopped it. Said I get to live. I left the mountain, met the beast. Left me a mark, allowed me to return. I ran and I ran. Back to the car. Drove home. Wife didn't believe me, children didn't trust me. Sent them to the woods to see. They kicked and screamed so I hit them. Leda stopped moving after 5th hit. Athelstan kept crying, but quieter than before. He flinched when I looked at him. Siggy's head bled from the gash on her scalp. She stopped moving too. Dumped them in the forest. It was upset. Said I wasn't protected anymore. Took Siggy, he said it was too late. Leda and Athelstan were taken too, but I knew it wouldn't kill them. Sent me to the mountain. Found a strange knife. Near a face in the oak. Fool, that face was. Killed Ivar, he shattered at the scratch of it. Went to face older one, couldn't find it. New one was there, was someone else, from far away. I left the mountain, got back to my car. Drove home. Cops were there. Took me away. Mama was crying, Papa was mad. I hated when Papa was mad. They sent me to this place, New Valley. It's too cold here. People are too cold. They say I'm mad but I'm not. I'm just cold. I still see it in my dreams. The mass of hateful things, but of a kindness unfamiliar to us. Won't hurt those respectful of its rules. I disrespected it by bringing my family. I hate it. It says it will send it here, the mummy of ice. To finish what Ivar started. I know it won't. Too far from it for that. All it can do is torment me. My head feels cold but my body is finally warm, except the bite. It says soon. It says hell waits for me. I know, but it's so cold there. I'm tired of being cold. I hate it, I hate it, I hate it. At least it's not the tree. Fool's Ballad. The following publication is a section of the private journal of patient number 68. Sylvester Anastas. Mr. Anastas willingly donated to the Awareness Project. He insists his true name is Orpahus, the mythical musician and poet. Though he fancies himself as such, his writing style is not reflective of this. Mr. Anastas was interred at New Valley by his wife after he suddenly left his career as a pharmacist to pursue music. He also refused to acknowledge her as his wife, instead spending hours on end attempting to play a crude homemade lyre and singing about Eurydice, another mythological figure. When his lyre is removed from his possession, Mr. Anastas becomes violent to himself and others, ripping chunks of flesh off of his arms and legs with his teeth. When asked why he does this, he claims that he is under attack by Maenads, and that the orderlies sent to save him were warriors sent by Zeus so that he may continue to serenade the gods with his music. Mr. Anastas has expressed a willingness to be interviewed, and due to the nature of his illness, New Valley Mental Asylum director Dr. Richter has approved an Ask Box, where anyone may ask Mr. Anastas questions. Questions and Mr. Anastas's responses will be monitored, and if deemed necessary, edited in or removed. Thank you for your cooperation. Journal reads as follows. Oh, how I miss my dear sweet Eurydice. Each day I long once more for her embrace. That vile woman, that Mary, she had me put here. Oh, and that doctor. Hark, he is in cahoots with that wretch. They put me in this horrid place. By the gods! If I were a violent man they would sooner taste the steel of my blade than be graced with my music. Woe is me, for I am an artist, and I shan't deny the world what it deserves. That whore Mary claims I was a doctor who dabbled in alchemy, but she is wrong. This is not Sylvester but the noble Orpheus, the man who makes Hermes green with envy at the way I pluck at the strings of his invention. How my delicate fingers glide with efficacy, and my voice soothes that even the vicious lion would sit with a feeble lamb in its paws and feel nothing of hunger or bloodlust. The doctors shall never understand that I must see Hades. I must rescue my dear sweet wife from the claws of death. I appealed with success once before, surely the god of death would have the power to let me try again. Oh, but woe is me, for I have no way out of this place. Perhaps if I adopt this Sylvester identity I will be set free of my shackles. Nay, I am too honest, I could never deceive these people. Besides, I know nothing about that man. Eurydice waits for me, I know she does. She cries and cries in the company of the dead and damned waiting for her husband. I will return to her one day, I know I will. Either through death or by bringing her to the surface. I wouldn't dare make the same mistake as the one that took her from me. There is a doctor here, Miss Amber. She reminds me so much of my lost love. When the Maenads attack me, I think of her and I try to endure for her sake. Perhaps she is the reincarnation of the apple of my eye, the sugar atop my pastry. I am good because it lets me speak to her more. She thinks she can bring Sylvester to the surface but he'll never come back. His body is mine now, though his body is wretched as his wife, the Gorgon. I can still ply my craft. Back to the doctor. She showed me her office once. It was filled with portraits of the wretched pups called children. How dare any man other than I sully the garden of Eurydice? I'll kill him, I'll do it if I ever see him. Or so I'd like to think. I'm far too much the artist to ever resort to violence. They say that the bite marks and scars are from a self-inflicted origin, but I know it was from those horrid forest women, jealous of my dear wife and angry that I would not be overcome by lust. The divine warriors, clad in white, would always rescue me from their attempts to tear me asunder. For now I'll play my music, and pine after my dear sweet Miss Amber, my Eurydice. We shall be together soon enough, either in life or death. For now, I shall just watch. End of journal entry. Due to Mr. Anastas's obsession with Dr. Amber, she has been asked to work with him on regaining his true identity, as he seems to trust her more than anyone else. However, it will be in strictly monitored sessions due to this obsession. Any questions for Mr. Anastas will be reviewed, and if deemed appropriate will be presented to him for answering. An answer is not promised, and if one is given that is not deemed appropriate, it will not be shared. Thank you for your cooperation. Snake in the Grass. Interview of New Valley Mental Asylum patient number 236. Tobias Allister. Mr. Allister has multiple personality disorder, with 36 observed personalities. However, 4 personalities not including Tobias are prominent, claiming a shared alpha status. We believe that these personalities are the ones most often utilized during Mr. Allister's activities prior to admittance to New Valley. Mr. Allister is one of the more violent patients, having escaped the death penalty due to his condition. Great care is taken around Mr. Allister, especially when he is presenting as Tobias, as he will quickly shift to either Butch or Queenie. His more violent personalities, if given the chance to do harm. He is responsible for the death of at least 3 other patients before being placed into a more secure solitary area. When approached for an interview, Mr. Allister claimed he would provide an interviewer. New Valley Mental Asylum Director Dr. Richter greenlit this unorthodox scenario due in part to private curiosity, and in the interest of the Awareness Project, which he is spearheading. Transcript has been published under the Awareness Project, a project that hopes to help shed light on the complex and unfortunately often disturbing aspects present in a variety of mental illnesses that many of our patients exhibit. Nonverbal actions are placed in italics and parentheses. Due to safety concerns, Mr. Allister will not be available for an in-person interview for the foreseeable future, but will be available for a similar Q&A as Mr. Anastas. Similarly, if a question or answer is deemed inappropriate, censorship or removal may occur. If a question is deemed inappropriate, it will not be answered by Mr. Allister. Thank you for your cooperation. Personalities presented during interview are as follows. Interviewer. 20s radio show host impression. Tobias. Quiet, often barely speaking above a whisper. Butch. Gruff tone, Australian accent. Queenie. Valley girl impression. Big Steve. Baritone, deepest voice of heard personalities. Movement from one side of the table to other will not be indicated, instead known to occur when personality switches from interviewer to the other 5. The interview went as follows. Interviewer. Mr. Tobias, you mind telling me why you did that to those people? Tobias. I didn't, it was Butch and Queenie, I swear. They made me do it. I'm the first but not the strongest. They did it. Butch likes to cut and Queenie likes the domination and blood. Interviewer. I see, so Butch. Fuck you want? I'm a busy man. Don't make me rip your throat out, mate. Oh, I'd love to cut out your heart, you drongo. Feel it ba-boom in my hand till I squeeze the last bits out of it for me, girl. She's a feisty Sheila. During this, Tobias makes the motions of drawing a blade across the chest of an imaginary body, then slowly closing the fist, as if squeezing something. Interviewer. Your girl? Do you mean Queenie, perhaps chum? Queenie. He's like, totally not your chum. And yeah, totally. I love the blood, you know? It's like so warm, and like, delicious. I just love to drink it. Way better than a margarita or a daiquiri. I'm like so lucky my butchie cuts out the best parts for me. He. Interviewer. I see. So Steve, mind talking to us about how you feel? Big Steve. I hate blood and guts. I hate looking at all the cuts. Watching poor folks on their backs try to squirm, makes me think of a little worm. When I think of that thing so small and pink. Makes me think of fish that stink. Interviewer. So, you fancy yourself a poet, huh? Gotta say, bub, those were some lovely rhymes, and just in time. This interview was starting to make me nervous. Big Steve. No. Interviewer. Oh, I see. Ahem, moving on. Tobias, my friend, you still with us? Tobias. Huh. Yeah. It's just. They scare me, Butch, Queenie, and Steve. Butch and Queenie for reasons you already know, and Big Steve cause he could snap at any moment. Especially if you insult the way he talks. Interviewer. Huh. Noted, lad. Now, could you tell me where this all started? Tobias. You mean when everyone moved in? I'd say it was cause of Uncle Bobby and my stepdaddy. Interviewer. Tell me about them. Tobias. Well. His head begins to shake, and he clutches the sides as if in agony. Butch. I hated Bobby. Queenie. Daddy, no. Big Steve. Horrid men, made us feel like a cornered hen. He was hungry for a feast, and we were fodder for the beast. Interviewer. Is everything all right? Tobias. No, please. Let me just tell him. They aren't here anymore, can't hurt us. Can't enter the hive. Butch. You're right, he can't. Queenie. Daddy, no, please, I'm safe here. Big Steve. Indeed, in this place they cannot feed. Interviewer. Who is? They chums? Uncle Bobby and stepdaddy? Tobias. Yeah, you weren't there. Not with us. You only just got here. Butch. I cut his throat, ate his heart, used his liver as lube to skull. Queenie. Butchie sweetie, like everyone hates that you did that. Let's not talk about it like ever again, okay? Thanks babe. Butch. Sorry sweetie, won't happen again. Interviewer clears throat in a nervous fashion and says, that's a very colorful image, Mr. Butch. Butch. It feels greater than you'd think. Just pop out an Ian, Big Steve. Butch. That scene, it's horrendous. The fact you find such pleasure makes you a monster that's quite tremendous. Butch. Oi. That was a shitty line, Stevie. Bad rhyme. Big Steve. What did you say to me man? I'll cook your flesh in a frying pan. Butch. How you gonna do that, little Stevie? We're all stuck with this meek little thing. Tobias. Please stop guys. You're starting to really scare me. Butch. Oh yeah? Is that so? I'll give you something to be scared of Toby boy. Tobias begins to roll on the floor, throwing punches and attempting to defend himself from an imaginary assailant. Orderlies dressed in protective gear restrain him while a sedative is administered. After Mr. Allister comes to, he thanks the orderlies for helping him while Big Steve and Queenie calmed down Butch. Bruises began to form on his face from suspected self-inflicted wounds. After being examined by medical staff, Mr. Allister requests to be placed back in his cell, which is granted. At this time, the interviewing personality has not resurfaced, but may return upon a secondary interview with Mr. Allister. Dr. Richter has greenlit a secondary session on a to-be-decided date.